The defeat at Sigma Station changed everything. Within days, the Valix Collective and Dren's sovereignty accepted human terms completely. They began releasing human slaves and offering reparations. Both empires hoped that cooperation would lead to access to human technology, though they knew humanity would never share their secrets willingly. The Thurian hegemony refused to surrender. Admiral Tornak, humiliated by his defeat, convinced the Thurian leadership to resist. They still commanded thousands of warships and controlled hundreds of worlds. Surely humanity could not defeat an entire empire with just a few hundred ships, no matter how advanced those ships were. Tornak did not understand that humanity had learned patience. They did not need to conquer the Thurian Empire. They just needed to make keeping it too expensive and painful to maintain. Admiral Myung-hee launched the next phase of the human strategy. 200 warships emerged from the void. The entire human defense fleet revealed at last. They split into 20 groups of 10 ships each and began a campaign of liberation. Every Thurian slave world became a target. Human fleets appeared without warning, defeated the garrison forces, and freed every enslaved species they found. Not just humans, but the dozens of other races the Thurians had conquered over centuries. The ships broadcasted a simple message in every language. Humanity offers you freedom. Join us and we will protect you from those who enslaved you. World after world rose in rebellion. Species that had served the Thurians for generations suddenly saw hope for the first time. The Empire found itself fighting revolts across 50 systems simultaneously. They did not have enough soldiers to hold everything. Every time they crushed one rebellion, 3 more erupted. The military resources needed to maintain control were bleeding the Empire dry. Captain Su-jin commanded one of the liberation fleets. She was young, born during the exile in the void, and had never known Earth under occupation. To her, freedom was the natural state of humanity, and she could not understand why anyone would accept slavery. Her fleet specialized in hit-and-run attacks, appearing at dawn to strike Thurian facilities and vanishing before reinforcements arrived. On the world of Talax 7, Su-jin's fleet freed over 100,000 slaves of 5 different species. The Thurian commander tried to use the slaves as hostages, threatening to execute them if the humans attacked. Su-jin's response was to teleport armed soldiers directly into the slave compounds, eliminating the guards before they could harm anyone. The Thurian commander surrendered when he realized his hostages were already free. The pattern repeated across Thurian space. Every liberation weakened the Empire. Every freed world became a recruiting ground for new allies. Species that had suffered under Thurian cruelty for centuries eagerly joined the human cause. They did not have advanced ships or powerful weapons, but they had numbers and motivation. The Empire was collapsing from within. 3 months into the liberation campaign, Admiral Tornak finally admitted the truth. The Thurian Empire could not win. They could not match human technology. They could not hold their conquests against combined rebellions. They could not even find the human home base to strike back. Every option led to the same conclusion. Continued resistance meant total destruction. Tornak did something no Thurian leader had done in recorded history. He requested permission to travel to Earth as a supplicant. The message was broadcast publicly, so that every Thurian could see their supreme military commander admitting defeat. Tornak boarded a small diplomatic shuttle without weapons or guards and traveled to Earth orbit. Human ships escorted him to the surface, to the restored United Nations building where President Da-un and Admiral Myung-hee waited. The meeting was broadcast across the galaxy. Tornak, who had destroyed human colonies a century ago, now stood before human leaders and spoke the words he had never imagined saying. On behalf of the Thurian hegemony, I accept your terms completely. We beg for peace. We ask for mercy. We surrender. Myung-hee accepted the surrender with simple dignity. The Thurian Empire would release all slaves, pay reparations, and withdraw from conquered territories. Thurian ships would be monitored to ensure compliance. Any violation of the terms would result in immediate military action. Tornak signed the documents with hands that shook, knowing he had just witnessed the end of his empire's dominance. The galaxy entered a new era. The 3 empires still existed, but they were shadows of their former power. Hundreds of species gained independence under human protection. The human commonwealth expanded to control 50 star systems, not through conquest but through alliance. Every freed species was offered the choice to join or remain independent, and most chose to join. Admiral Taiwan took the Indomitable on patrol missions to distant sectors. The massive battle station became a symbol of the new order. Pirates and slavers fled at reports of its approach. Empire remnants that thought about resuming their old ways saw it appear on their sensors and reconsidered. The Indomitable did not need to fire its weapons anymore. Its mere presence was enough to keep the peace. 5 years after the liberation of Earth, the galaxy had stabilized. Trade routes that had been controlled by empires opened to all species. Technology-sharing programs helped former vassal species rebuild their civilizations. The old system of domination and slavery was breaking down, replaced by something closer to cooperation and mutual respect. Captain Sujin, now a commander, stood on the bridge of her ship and reflected on how much had changed. She had been born in darkness and cold, in hidden colonies that existed only to prepare for war. Now she traveled freely through space, visiting worlds she had only read about. Humanity had gone from slaves to guardians in just a century, but the work was not finished. Distress calls still came from distant systems. Pirates still raided vulnerable worlds. Empire hardliners still plotted to restore the old order. Humanity remained vigilant, knowing that freedom required constant defense. On Earth, monuments rose to honor those who had made victory possible. Ji-Wan, who had led the resistance and died before seeing humanity free. Tai-Hyun, who had risked everything to gather intelligence. The thousands who had perished in the evacuation from Earth. The soldiers who had died liberating slave worlds. Every name was recorded, every sacrifice remembered. Admiral Myung-hee, now considered the founder of the new Galactic Order, gave a speech at the dedication of the largest monument. We did not seek to become conquerors. We did not want to rule the galaxy. We wanted only to be free and to ensure that others could be free too. The empires tried to break us and failed. They learned that humanity does not break. We bend, we adapt, we survive, and we come back stronger. A new distress call came from a distant system. Another species crying for help against oppressors. Commander Sujin received the orders and prepared her fleet to jump. The human commonwealth would answer. They always answered. That was what separated them from the empires that had tried to destroy them. Humanity had learned a hard lesson over a century of suffering. True strength was not in dominating others. It was in protecting those who could not protect themselves. It was in building something better than what came before. The empires had wanted humanity to kneel and serve. Instead, humanity had taught the galaxy what real civilization looked like. The work would never truly end. But humanity was ready for whatever came next. Sigma Station floated in neutral space, a diplomatic platform built centuries ago when the three empires needed a place to negotiate without risking war. The station was massive, designed to accommodate thousands of diplomats, guards, and support staff. It had conference rooms the size of sports stadiums and communication systems that could broadcast across the entire galaxy. Today, the station was surrounded by a forest of warships, 60 capital ships from the Thurian hegemony, each one bristling with weapons, 60 from the Valix Collective, sleek and deadly, 60 from the Dren Sovereignty, heavily armored and intimidating, 180 of the most powerful vessels in known space, all gathered to face humanity. Admiral Tornak of the Thurian hegemony commanded the Empire forces. He was old even by Thurian standards, having fought in wars for over 300 years. Tornak had conquered worlds, crushed rebellions, and destroyed fleets. He did not believe that a species humanity had defeated so easily a century ago could truly challenge empire power. This meeting was just to show them their place. Matriarch Kelsa represented the Valix Collective. She was more cautious than Tornak, having reviewed the intelligence from human raids. The technology impressed her, and the precision of the attack suggested careful planning. But surely the humans could not have built a fleet large enough to threaten 3 empires. Surely this was just a desperate gamble by a broken species. Chancellor Morn of the Dren Sovereignty played his usual games. He had sent secret messages to the humans, offering alliance against the other empires. He had also assured the Thurians and Valix that the Dren would stand with them against the human threat. Morn believed in keeping all options open until he saw which side would win. The Empire representatives boarded Sigma Station and took their places in the main conference chamber. They brought guards, advisors, and weapons. The room could hold 5,000 people. But today it felt empty with just the Empire delegations and their entourages. They waited for the humans to arrive and whatever small ships had survived their insurgency. The station's sensors suddenly screamed warnings. Every ship in the Empire fleet went to alert status. Something was happening in space near the station. Something that should not be possible. Reality itself seemed to tear open. A dimensional rift larger than any previously recorded. The rift pulsed with energy that made every sensor go crazy. Then it emerged. The UHSS Indomitable. Calling it a ship failed to capture the reality of what appeared. The Indomitable was a mobile battle station. A floating fortress that dwarfed every vessel present. 20 kilometers long, 5 kilometers wide, wrapped in shields that visibly distorted space around them. The hull was covered in weapons batteries, missile ports, and energy projectors. Its power signature exceeded what should be theoretically possible. Every Empire captain stared at their screens in disbelief. The Indomitable was larger than some moons. It made the Empire flagships look like escort vessels. Its weapon systems, if fired all at once, could destroy planets. Its shields could probably withstand bombardment from the entire assembled fleet. This was not a warship. This was a statement of power so overwhelming that it redefined what was possible. Admiral Taiwan commanded the Indomitable. He was younger than the Empire commanders expected, only 60 years old, but he carried himself with absolute confidence. His message broadcast across all frequencies. We are here to talk. But make no mistake, this is what mercy looks like. Had we come for war, you would already be dead. Tornak felt something he had not experienced in centuries. Fear. The Thurians had ruled through superior technology and overwhelming force for thousands of years. Now something existed that made their greatest achievements look primitive. Kelsa was already calculating odds, and the numbers were not good. Morn abandoned his plans for playing both sides and focused on survival. Taiwan arrived at Sigma Station alone. No guards, no weapons, no armor. He walked into the conference chamber wearing a simple uniform with no decorations except his rank insignia. The message was clear. He did not need protection because nothing in this room could threaten him. The Indomitable floating outside was all the protection anyone could possibly need. The negotiations began with Taiwan laying out humanity's terms. First, all human slaves across the galaxy would be freed immediately and returned to human-controlled space at Empire expense. Second, the empires would pay reparations in technology, resources, and territory to compensate for the century of suffering. Third, the empires would surrender data on all their vassal species, and humanity would offer those species the choice of independence under human protection. Fourth, any empire that attacked human vessels or interfered with human operations would face immediate military retaliation with no warnings given. Fifth, humanity claimed the void and all surrounding sectors as sovereign territory, and any Empire ship entering without permission would be destroyed. The terms were not negotiable. Accept them or face war. Tornak exploded with rage. You dare threaten us with war? You dare demand we surrender our vassals? We have billions of soldiers and thousands of ships. You have one oversized station and a handful of raiders. We will crush you like insects. Taiwan remained calm. Then attack. The Indomitable's shields are currently down. If you believe you can win, open fire now. We will not even defend ourselves until after the first shot. Prove that your fleets can back up your threats. Silence filled the chamber. Every Empire commander wanted to order the attack, but none of them could. The display of the Indomitable's power had been too overwhelming. Even with shields down, could they really destroy it before it wiped out their fleets? And if the humans had built one such vessel, how many more did they have hidden in the void? The risk was too great. Tornak returned to his flagship and made a decision that would haunt him. He ordered his 60 ships to attack the Indomitable. If they could destroy it, they would prove that humanity could be defeated. If they failed, at least they would have tried. The other empires held their fire, waiting to see what would happen. The battle lasted 4 minutes. The Thurian fleet opened fire with everything they had. Enough firepower to crack planets struck the Indomitable from every angle. The station's shields activated instantly, forming a perfect sphere of dark matter containment. Every shot splashed harmlessly against the barrier. Sensors showed the shields were not even straining under the assault. The Indomitable fired back. Quantum disruption cannons targeted weapon systems with surgical precision. Dark matter torpedoes burned through conventional shields like they were not there. Gravity well generators disabled engines without destroying ships. Within 4 minutes, 15 Thurian vessels were drifting hulks, their weapons and engines destroyed but their crews alive. The other 45 fled in panic. Taiwan broadcast a final message. This is humanity showing restraint. We could have killed everyone in this system. We chose not to. Remember that choice when you decide how to respond to our terms. The empires that thought they ruled the galaxy now understood a terrible truth. A new power had emerged, and it was stronger than all of them. The void was not a welcoming place. The dark matter clouds twisted space itself, making every journey dangerous and every day a struggle for survival. But for humanity, it was home now. The hidden colonies grew slowly, carved into asteroids and built on rogue planets that drifted through the darkness without stars to warm them. Scientist Dong Hyun worked in laboratories that had to be heated constantly to keep the equipment from freezing. He led a team of researchers who studied the technical data that Taihyun and others had smuggled from Thurian facilities. Every piece of information was precious. Every stolen specification was analyzed hundreds of times, looking for weaknesses and opportunities. The breakthrough came from an unexpected direction. Researcher Bora was studying the dark matter that surrounded their colonies, trying to understand why it interfered so badly with sensors and communications. She discovered that dark matter was not just passive interference. It could be manipulated, controlled, and most importantly, weaponized. Bora's discovery changed everything. The empires had built their technology around conventional energy sources: fusion reactors, antimatter containment, zero-point extraction, all powerful, but all limited by the laws of physics as they understood them. Dark matter operated on different rules. When properly harnessed, it produced 10 times more power than fusion with a fraction of the mass. Dong Hyun immediately saw the implications. Ships powered by dark matter reactors could be smaller, faster, and more powerful than anything the empires possessed. Weapons using dark matter principles could bypass conventional shields. Humanity had found its edge, the advantage that might let them challenge empires that had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years. But understanding the theory and building the technology were two different challenges. Commander Hyunwoo volunteered to test the first experimental dark matter reactor. It was a dangerous job. 3 previous test reactors had exploded, killing everyone within 100 meters. But Hyunwoo believed in the cause. He strapped himself into the cockpit of a small fighter craft, its hull barely large enough to contain the new reactor and basic life support. The reactor came online smoothly. Hyunwoo felt the ship respond with power that made his hands shake. The small fighter accelerated faster than ships 10 times its size. He pushed the engines harder, testing their limits. The fighter performed maneuvers that should have been impossible, turning and spinning with grace that defied every rule of space combat humanity had learned. Hyunwoo returned to the colony and climbed out of his fighter with a huge smile on his face. The test had worked perfectly. Humanity could now build ships that would make the Empire's fleets look slow and clumsy. The void erupted in celebration that night. For the first time since the occupation began, people dared to hope. General Subin took the new technology and began planning humanity's military future. She established training programs that pushed recruits to their absolute limits. Every soldier learned to use powered armor that enhanced their strength and speed. Every pilot trained in simulators that tested them against scenarios based on Thurian combat doctrine. Every engineer studied how to repair and maintain equipment in the harshest conditions. The hidden shipyards worked constantly. Humanity did not have the resources to build thousands of ships, so they focused on quality instead of quantity. Each vessel was a masterpiece of engineering, incorporating technologies that the empires had never imagined. Dark matter reactors for power, quantum disruption weapons that could tear through conventional shields, dimensional jump drives that allowed ships to teleport short distances without using the ancient gateway network. 80 years into the exile, the first true warship rolled out of the orbital construction facility. Commander Hyunwoo, now a gray-haired veteran, stood before the ship and felt tears in his eyes. They had named it the Defiance, and it was beautiful in a deadly way. 20 times larger than the experimental fighter he had tested decades ago, bristling with weapons, wrapped in shields that shimmered with barely contained power. The Defiance's maiden voyage was a complete success. It performed beyond even the most optimistic projections. The ship could take hits that would destroy Thurian battleships and barely notice. Its weapons could strike targets with precision at ranges the empires considered impossible. Its jump drive allowed it to appear and disappear like a ghost, making it nearly impossible to track or target. Admiral Yan Wu, who had been a young soldier during the evacuation from Earth, now commanded humanity's growing fleet. She pushed for immediate action, arguing that humanity was ready to strike back. But Ji-won, ancient and frail now, urged patience. They had one chance to reveal themselves, one opportunity to strike. If they moved too soon and failed, the empires would hunt down and destroy every human in the galaxy. The debate raged in the council chambers for months. Some wanted to act immediately. Others argued for more time, more ships, more preparation. Ji-won listened to all sides before making her decision. They would wait until they had 200 warships and 50,000 trained soldiers. Not enough to conquer the empires, but enough to make them fear. Enough to force them to negotiate. 20 more years passed. The original resistance leaders were dying. Ji-won passed away in her sleep. Her last words a whispered prayer that she would live to see Earth free. Tae-hyun, the engineer who had risked everything to gather intelligence, died in a construction accident, crushed when a ship section collapsed. But their sacrifice was not forgotten. Every new ship carried the names of the dead, memorials etched into their hulls. Captain Seung-ho joined the military as a young man born in the void, never having seen Earth except in pictures and videos. He trained in the powered armor units, becoming one of the most skilled soldiers in the fleet. Seung-ho represented the new generation of humanity, people who had known nothing but preparation for war. They were harder than their parents, more focused, driven by stories of Earth and the millions still enslaved. By the 100th year of exile, humanity had achieved their goals. 200 warships floated in hidden berths throughout the void. 50,000 soldiers trained constantly, ready for the day they would strike. The fleet was small compared to the Empire's millions of ships and billions of soldiers. But every human vessel was worth 10 enemy ships in combat. Every human soldier wore armor that made them nearly invincible. Admiral Myung-hee took command of the entire human defense fleet. She was young for such responsibility, only 50 years old. But she had proven herself brilliant in strategy and ruthless in execution. Myung-hee gathered the fleet commanders and laid out the plan. They would not attack military targets first. They would strike at the slave camps and labor stations, freeing humans and showing the empires that their long nightmare was ending. The time for hiding was over. Humanity was ready to remind the galaxy why they should never have been underestimated. The stars had always called to humanity, but no one expected the answer to come with fire and death. Captain Han Sol stood on the bridge of the Pioneer's Hope, watching the alien structure materialize on his screens. The massive ring floated in the darkness between stars, pulsing with energy that his sensors could barely understand. His crew had searched for signs of intelligent life for 3 months, and now they had found something incredible. An ancient gateway left behind by a civilization that died long before humans learned to make fire. Han Sol made a decision that would change everything. He ordered his ship to activate the gateway. The ring flared to life, and the Pioneer's Hope passed through a tunnel in space itself, emerging thousands of light years from Earth in mere seconds. The crew celebrated their discovery, not knowing they had just broadcast humanity's location to every empire in the galaxy. 3 weeks later, the sky above Earth turned dark with alien ships. Admiral Vorak of the Thurian hegemony arrived with 50 warships, each one larger than Earth's biggest building. The silicon-based creatures inside those ships had conquered 100 worlds, and they saw humanity as nothing more than another resource to exploit. Vorak's message was simple and cruel: surrender now, or watch your world burn. President Kyung-min gathered Earth's leaders in an emergency meeting. The room fell silent as military advisors explained the terrible truth. Earth had only 5 combat-ready spacecraft, and their weapons were designed for asteroid mining, not war. The Thurian ships could destroy Earth's cities from orbit, and there was nothing humanity could do to stop them. The decision broke Kyung-min's heart, but he had no choice. He accepted the Thurian terms of surrender. Within days, alien soldiers walked Earth's streets. The terms were worse than anyone imagined. Earth would provide resources, technology, and people. Millions of humans would be shipped across the galaxy to work in Thurian mines, factories, and war zones. Humanity had become slaves to an empire that saw them as less than animals. Among those taken was a young engineer named Tae-hyun. He was pulled from his home in Seoul and transported to a massive shipyard orbiting a distant world. The conditions were brutal. Humans worked 18-hour shifts building Thurian warships, breathing air so toxic it burned their lungs. Taehyun watched people die every day from exhaustion, accidents, and the casual cruelty of their overseers. But Taehyun noticed something important. The Thurian technology was advanced, but it was also old. Very old. The aliens had stopped innovating thousands of years ago, relying instead on conquering other species and stealing their knowledge. Their ships were powerful but inefficient. Their weapons were deadly but predictable. Taehyun realized that if humanity could study this technology, they might find weaknesses. He began taking risks. Using hidden data chips smuggled by other human workers, Taehyun recorded everything he saw. Ship designs, weapon specifications, shield frequencies, power systems. He passed this information through a secret network of resistance members scattered across Thurian space. The information eventually reached Earth, where it found its way to a woman who would change everything. Admiral Ji-won had been forced to retire after the surrender. She refused to serve the puppet government the Thurians installed on Earth. Instead, she went underground, literally. Deep beneath the surface of Earth, in bunkers and tunnels that the occupiers never found, Ji-won built a resistance movement. Thousands of humans who refused to accept slavery joined her cause. Scientists, soldiers, engineers, teachers, anyone who believed that humanity deserved better. Ji-won knew that fighting the Thurians directly would be suicide. Earth was too closely watched, too heavily controlled. She needed time, space, and freedom to build something that could challenge an empire. The data from Taehyun gave her hope, but it also brought terrible news. A Thurian deserter named Kelvin, who had grown disgusted with his empire's cruelty, shared a horrifying secret. The Thurian leadership planned to exterminate humanity within 10 years. They had decided that humans were too clever, too adaptable, too dangerous to keep as slaves. Ji-won called together her most trusted advisors in a hidden bunker beneath what used to be Tokyo. Among them was Hae-sung, a brilliant scientist who had escaped the initial roundup of Earth's intellectuals. The room was cold and damp, lit by stolen power cells. But the people gathered there carried the future of humanity in their hands. Hae-sung presented a desperate plan. They could not win by fighting from Earth. The resistance needed to leave, to find somewhere the Thurians could not follow. They needed to build in secret, to develop technology that could match the empires. It would take decades, maybe even a century, but it was humanity's only chance. Ji-won made the hardest decision of her life. The resistance would evacuate Earth. They would take thousands of humanity's brightest minds and disappear into the darkness between stars. They would leave behind those who could not escape, but they would never forget them. One day they would return. One day they would free every human in the galaxy. Captain Min-soo commanded the evacuation fleet. They used old mining ships that the Thurians barely bothered to track, disguising their true purpose. Over 6 months, they smuggled out 15,000 people. Scientists, engineers, soldiers, teachers, children. Each departure was a risk. Each successful escape was a miracle. The final evacuation run almost ended in disaster. Thurian patrol ships detected unusual activity and moved to investigate. Min-soo's ship carrying 3,000 refugees in its cargo holds had to run. The Thurians opened fire, and 2 other ships in the fleet were destroyed. 6,000 people died in explosions that lit up the space around Earth like new stars. But Min-soo's ship escaped, jumping through a gateway to the coordinates Hae-sung had discovered. Their destination was a region of space the aliens called the Void, a massive cloud of dark matter that scrambled sensors and made navigation nearly impossible. The empires considered it worthless and dangerous. To humanity, it was salvation. The refugee fleet disappeared into the darkness, and their signals vanished from every tracking system in the galaxy. On Earth, the remaining humans mourned in secret. 80% of the population had vanished over 6 months. The Thurians assumed disease or despair had killed them. They never imagined that an entire civilization had gone into hiding, preparing for the day they would strike back. In the void, on cold rocks orbiting dead stars, humanity began to build. They had time now. They had freedom. They had the stolen secrets of empire technology and the determination of a species that refused to die. General Subin organized the refugees into a military society. Every person had a role. Every child was taught that they were not refugees, but soldiers in a war that would last generations. Ji-won stood on the surface of their first hidden colony. looking up at the dark matter clouds that concealed them. She was old now, and she knew she would never see Earth free again. But she believed in the next generation. She believed in humanity's ability to adapt, to innovate, to survive. The century of silence had begun. The mining complex on Craxus Prime operated 24 hours a day, every day without rest. 3,000 human slaves worked in the tunnels beneath the planet's surface, digging for rare minerals that the Thurian hegemony needed for their ships. The overseers were cruel and the conditions were deadly. Humans died every week from cave-ins, equipment failures, or simply exhaustion. Taman had worked in the mines for 15 years. He barely remembered Earth anymore. The blue sky and green trees his parents had described seemed like fairy tales. All he knew was darkness, pain, and the constant fear of the overseers. The lead overseer, a Thurian named Zultan, seemed to enjoy human suffering. He would withhold food as punishment, reduce oxygen levels in the tunnels to make them work harder, and randomly select workers for beatings. On a day like any other, Taman was deep in a tunnel when the lights suddenly went out. Then came sounds he had never heard before. Weapons fire, but not Thurian energy weapons. These were sharp cracks followed by impacts. Screaming from the overseers, running footsteps that seemed too fast to be possible. The lights came back on, different now. Portable units that humans in strange armor had placed throughout the complex. Captain Sung-ho stood at the tunnel entrance, his powered armor making him look like a giant. His voice boomed through speakers. Every human slave, stop working and gather in the central chamber. You are being rescued. Taman thought he was hallucinating from the toxic air. Rescued? By whom? But he followed the instructions, stumbling toward the central chamber with hundreds of other confused and frightened workers. There he saw something impossible. 50 human soldiers in advanced armor, their faces hidden behind helmets. Every Thurian overseer lay dead or unconscious on the floor. The entire complex had been taken in less than 10 minutes. Sung-ho removed his helmet, revealing a face that looked strange to Taman. This man was too healthy, too strong, too confident. He did not look like someone who had lived under Thurian control. Where did you come from? Someone asked. Sung-ho smiled. The void. We have been preparing for a century. Today, humanity strikes back. The rescue teams moved efficiently. They provided medical care to the injured, food and water to the starving, and warm clothing to people who had worn rags for years. Then they activated teleportation devices and started moving people to transport ships waiting in orbit. Within 2 hours, every human had been evacuated from Craxus Prime. The soldiers left behind a message burned into the planet's surface in letters 50 meters tall. We are coming. News of the Craxus Prime raid spread across the galaxy within days. The three empires called an emergency meeting of the Galactic Council, a diplomatic body they used to manage conflicts without triggering total war. Ambassador Corvin of the Thurian hegemony was furious. He showed footage of the raid to the other empires. Look at their technology. Look at their armor and weapons. This is not the primitive species we defeated a century ago. Ambassador Vex of the Valix Collective watched the footage with interest. The Valix had fought wars against the Thurians for centuries, and any enemy of the Thurians might be useful. Chancellor Morn of the Dren Sovereignty thought the same. Perhaps these humans could be turned into allies used as weapons against the other empires. None of them understood that humanity wanted no allies. Humanity wanted justice. Over the next 6 months, human strike forces hit 50 locations across Empire space. Every raid followed the same pattern. Precise intelligence, overwhelming force, complete success. They freed humans from slave camps on a dozen worlds. They destroyed labor stations in orbit around gas giants. They attacked prison facilities where humans were held as hostages to ensure compliance from Earth. The empires tried to fight back, but they could not catch the human ships. The vessels appeared from nowhere, struck hard and vanished before reinforcements could arrive. Empire sensors could not track the dimensional jumps. Empire weapons could not penetrate the dark matter shields. Empire commanders began to fear the darkness of space, knowing that death might materialize at any moment. Commander Jae-sung planned the biggest operation yet. The liberation of Earth itself. 3,000 Thurian soldiers controlled humanity's homeworld, backed by orbital weapons platforms that could bombard the surface if the population became rebellious. The Thurians had grown comfortable over the decades, not expecting any serious resistance from a broken species. Jae-sung brought 20 warships to Earth. the largest human fleet ever assembled for a single mission. They emerged from dimensional jumps directly above the planet, appearing in orbit before the Thurians even knew they were under attack. The orbital defense platforms opened fire, but their weapons splashed harmlessly against dark matter shields. Human ships returned fire with precision that left the Thurian crews no time to react. Within 10 minutes, every enemy vessel in orbit was destroyed or disabled. Ground teams teleported directly into Thurian command centers. The alien soldiers tried to fight, but they were no match for humans in powered armor. President Da-Yun, who had been forced to lead Earth's puppet government for decades, finally received the message she had prayed for. The commander of the Thurian ground forces was requesting permission to surrender. Taeyeon granted it gladly, then walked out of her office for the first time in years without Thurian guards following her. She broadcast a message to every human on Earth. Our long nightmare is over. The exiles have returned and they have brought our freedom. Cities erupted in celebration. People danced in streets that had been patrolled by alien soldiers just hours before. Children born under occupation saw the sky without enemy ships for the first time in their lives. Admiral Myung-hee arrived on Earth 3 days after the liberation. She met with Da-eun and the surviving resistance leaders who had stayed behind. The reunion was emotional. These people had suffered for a century, holding on to hope that rescue would someday come. Now they could barely believe it was real. But Myung-hee brought both good news and warnings. Earth was free, and over 50,000 humans had been liberated from slavery across the galaxy. However, the three empires still commanded vast military forces. The Thurian hegemony alone had over 10,000 warships. Humanity had won battles, but the war was far from over. Myung-hee explained her strategy. Humanity would not seek to conquer the empires. They did not have the numbers for total war. Instead, they would force the empires to negotiate. She had sent messages demanding that representatives from all three empires meet at Sigma Station, a neutral diplomatic platform, in 1 month. If they refused, humanity would bring war to their core worlds. The empires faced an impossible choice: fight a species whose technology they did not understand, or negotiate with former slaves who might demand their complete destruction. Military analysts across Empire space studied the footage from human attacks and reached disturbing conclusions. Human ships were superior individually. Human technology was advancing rapidly. The human fleet's true size remained unknown. The three empires sent their most powerful warships to Sigma Station, hoping to intimidate humanity. Each brought 60 capital ships, 180 of the deadliest vessels in the galaxy. They would show these upstart humans what real military power looked like. What they did not know was that humanity had one more surprise waiting for them.